Have you ever met someone and thought, why is this person so hard to convince? You show them evidence, nothing. You tell them a story, nothing. Why is that? Most people make that same mistake. They communicate the way they want to be communicated, not the way that the other person wants to receive that information. In this episode, I'll show you the 5 influence styles that shape human behavior. You'll learn what are their strengths and blind spots, what happens to their influence styles when they're under pressure, and at the end, the one skill you need to help you be better at influencing anyone. Having influence, moving people in a certain direction, it creates opportunities. It opens doors. You know this. You have a natural style right now that you leverage to try to get what you want. The problem is you don't know what that is and how to pivot when the situation calls for something different. I promise you this, by the end of this video, you know your natural influence style profile. You see, most people think influence is about saying the exact right words, the right thing, but it's not. It's actually understanding how the other person thinks. What are their beliefs? What do they care about? And that's where most people go wrong because we assume everybody process information the exact same way as we do. But they don't. Some people need more evidence. Some people need more stories. Some people need more trust. Some people need more direction. Some people need more understanding. And until you recognize the difference, you keep communicating in a language that the other person doesn't speak. You were influencing people long before you learn how to speak. Think about a toddler. They can't drive, they don't have money, they don't have status, they don't have credentials, and yet a 3-year-old can get an adult to completely change their behavior. How? They cry, they smile, they point, they hug, they persist. They have influence because influence is not just a business skill, it's a survival skill. For most of human history, survival depended on our ability to influence other human beings, our tribe. We warn others, we build alliances, we coordinate action. We learn how to deal with conflict. Humans didn't survive because we were the stronger species. We survived because we could work together. And to work together, we had to influence each other. And over time, humans developed different pathways for doing that, different ways to shape behavior, different ways to create change. After years of studying behavioral science and working with leaders, founders, salespeople, scientists, marketers, I started noticing something interesting. Everyone had a preferred pathway, a natural influence style. And I'm going to introduce to you each of the 5 styles, but something important to remember. These are not archetypes. You're not trapped in a style. And all of us have propensities and inclinations. So while we might pull on one lever today, we pull on a different lever tomorrow. However, we have a natural profile. And some consist of one of these styles, some consist of 2 or 3. But let me tell you about the first one. Imagine a company just lost its biggest customer. The leadership team rushes into a meeting and everyone is stressed out, rightfully so. I mean, they're worried. And then everybody's talking, there's a lot of discussion. And then one person says, okay, here's what we're going to do. Instantly, the room gets calmer. That's a commander. Commanders influence through action, direction, momentum. When everybody else is thinking, deciding, discussing, hesitating, they're moving. They're doing something. The reason why this style is powerful is because human beings just hate uncertainty. Our brains crave having stability, certainty, direction, and it feels safer than being ambiguous. So when a commander steps forward, people often feel relief. The plan is not perfect, but uncertainty was taken away, and that's great. The blind spot, though, they can move so fast, they forget everyone is maybe not moving along with them. Speed can create clarity, but also sometimes speed creates mistakes. So when action is needed, nothing beats a commander. Now, let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum for style number 2. Imagine the same crisis. So this is the same company who's just lost a big customer. Same problem. But now another person responds differently. Instead of saying, here's what we'll do, here's the direction we're going to take, they say, hey, wait, hold up a moment. What actually happened? What does the data say? Do we need to get more evidence so that we know for sure? That's a scientist. Scientists influence through logic, through evidence, analysis, and structure. They're able to break complicated things into understandable parts. They're the people asking, how do we know that whatever assumptions we have is actually true? And scientists create certainty through understanding. If the commander, the style that we just talked about, reduces that uncertainty through action, through direction, the scientist reduces it through explanation, through research. And people trust them. They trust them because they're precise, they're accurate, they're thoughtful. The main challenge here, though, the blind spot, is that human beings rarely make decisions through logic alone. In fact, emotion is what drives decisions. And scientists can be right, but being right and being influential aren't always the same thing. So that's a key thing for scientists to watch out for, and a key blind spot. You can't have all the facts, but then you have to understand the emotion. Which brings us to the next influence style. Can you remember a statistic or factoid from last week? Probably not. But can you remember a story? Can you retell the story that you've been told? Probably. You see, there's a reason for that. For thousands of years, stories were how humans transferred knowledge. This was before books, before podcasts, before YouTube. Stories that's told mouth to mouth, person to person, was how we communicated. It was how people learned. And it influenced through meaning, through emotion, imagination. They don't just tell you what happened. They make you feel it. And that's so important because feelings help the brain remember. And because it's a story, it also helps you visualize it. So the best leaders, the best speakers, the best brands almost always understand the power of storytelling. Because influence begins with attention, and attention follows emotion. The blind spot for storytellers is that inspiration doesn't always create action. People can leave feeling motivated, leave feeling what you want them to feel, but then they don't change anything. They don't do anything different, which is why great storytellers often need a little commander mixed in. Now, before I show you the final styles, think about which of the styles you've encountered, which of the styles that you've seen in other people, and because the next two are the ones people almost never see coming. Imagine you're having a terrible day. You walk into your office, and before you say a single thing, someone actually notices you and comes up to you. You didn't say anything, but because they felt you, they felt your presence, they came up. That's a connector. Connectors influence through trust, through empathy, relationships, human understanding. Most people just wait for their turn to talk, but connectors listen. Not just what's about being said, but they listen for tension, emotions, energy. And behavioral science consistently shows something important. People are more willing to change when they feel understood, not judged. And so, because they practice this age-old lesson from Stephen Covey, first understand, then be understood, they are able to form that rapport and form that connection. And when people care about that, it becomes super powerful. People trust them, people open up to them, and people feel safe around them. The blind spot, though, sometimes they value that connection and harmony so much that they avoid the necessary conflict to push a behavior in a certain direction. Have you noticed something interesting? Every style has strengths and every style has blind spots. The commander, create action, momentum, but may move too fast. The scientist creates clarity, data, but may ignore emotion. The storyteller creates meaning, but may lack structure and a call to action. The goal isn't becoming a different style. The goal is actually to understand your default style. What is your natural style profile? Think of it as a palette of colors. What is your mix of colors? And that's why I created the Influence Styles quiz. 16 questions. It's completely free. You get immediate results. And the average time to take it is less than 3 minutes. I think the fastest was like 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Go to influencestylequiz.com or click on the link in the show notes and go find what is your natural influence style. That brings us to the final style, the one that surprised me the most when I looked at the data when I looked at what it meant. Let's say you're feeling stuck. You've been thinking about a problem for a long time, for weeks, and then you talk to someone. After one question after another, suddenly everything becomes clear. That's a sage. A sage influences through perspective, insight, wisdom. They see patterns others miss, connections people overlook. Maybe even the hidden forces behind what's actually happening, the hidden problem. They're quiet, they're reflective, they're observant. And then they see a pattern, and then they're able to kind of leave people in a perspective that they haven't seen before. People that encounter sages say, wow, that makes sense now. You helped me finally understand what's going on. Their superpower is not action and emotion or logic or clarity. It's the wisdom that they have. The problem, though, is that sometimes they stay in reflection for too long. When action is needed, when a question is needed, when research is needed, that's when they get stuck in their heads. But they can be extremely influential, especially when paired with a commander-like influence style where you push to action instead of just being in that internal reflective state for too long.
One of my students in my cohort program has an influence style profile of sage and scientist. When you have that mix, there is a craving for deep thought because you're a sage, and there's also a craving for data to help you make decisions. I helped coach this person because they were having trouble identifying their unique point of view. She wanted to have some data to give her some sort of direction. Is it this, or that? Now, the ability to use the styles to help her understand that because that's her default mode, she goes into this space where she's trying to, again, find more data, but also write more and reflect continuously. And so I urge her to tap into the commander style, sort of picking the one thing and going with it and having some sort of momentum, because in the end, the ability to get data comes from execution. You need to execute in order to get data about something. So that conversation and that coaching allowed her to pick a direction, put it out there, and then get data to kind of to refine her point of view. It's knowing your natural style that allows these kinds of conversations to take place.
Now, remember the question we started with? Why are some people impossible to persuade? Here's why. Because they're not processing information the same way that you are. A commander wants more direction. A scientist wants more evidence. A storyteller wants more meaning. A connector wants more trust. A sage wants more wisdom and understanding. And most people make that same mistake. They communicate the way they want to be communicated, not the way that the other person wants to receive that information. There's one more thing, though, which might be the most important insight in the entire framework and through the research that I've been doing. Pressure reveals preference. When stress hits, we actually stop adapting. We start defaulting to what is natural. Commanders become more decisive. Scientists analyze harder. Storytellers search for more meaning. Connectors focus on people. Sages retreat into reflection. Pressure doesn't create your style. Pressure actually reveals it, which explains why people behave very differently during conflict, during uncertainty, during the hard times. The person you're seeing under pressure is often their most natural influence style. This was an insight from the research that I've been doing. When you take your influence style profile, please also go take the research. It's going to help us understand more about influence, about the workplace, about how people are allowed to use their styles and how they use it. Just gives us more insights to this entire framework. The most influential people aren't masters of just one style. They're the students of all five. While the natural style profile says they're one or two or three, they understand when someone needs more evidence, more direction, more story, more trust, more clarity. And the moment you stop communicating the way you prefer and start communicating the way others process information, influence becomes dramatically easier and more powerful. And here's my challenge to you. As you go through your week, try to identify the styles around you. Your boss, your spouse, your coworkers, your teammates, your friends. You will start seeing them everywhere. And if you want to discover your own influence style, your blind spots, your team's blind spots, how you're most likely to influence others, take the influence style quiz. Get your team to take the quiz. influencestylequiz.com. And you'll find out what is your style profile, what your team style profile is, and the psychology behind all of that. If you love this, you'll want to meet Dr. Robert Cialdini. He is the godfather of influence, and he's wrote one of the most important books on persuasion science. And in our conversation, he shares the most impactful principle of influence, one that helped him receive a gift worth $700,000. Click here if you're watching this right now, or click on the link in the show notes if you're listening in. I will see you there. And in the meantime, go change behavior, change lives. Take care.